The demonization of white straight men, a black man's perspective. In the last decade, a troubling trend has emerged across American culture, one that vilifies white heterosexual men as inherently oppressive, toxic, or outdated. As a black man who believes in fairness, truth, and the dignity of all people, I find this narrative not only unjust, but deeply corrosive to the fabric of our society. The rhetoric surrounding white privilege and toxic masculinity has moved beyond critique and into condemnation, often targeting individuals based solely on their race and gender. This essay explores how liberal institutions, media outlets, and political operatives have perpetuated this narrative, and how it has led many white men and women to abandon the Democratic Party in favor of leaders who promise to restore dignity and balance. Media commentary and the rise of anti-white male rhetoric. Mainstream media has played a central role in shaping public perception, and in many cases, it has contributed to the vilification of white men. Consider the following examples. Don Lemon, a former CNN anchor, stated during a 2018 broadcast, "We have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right." While Lemon cited data on domestic terrorism, his sweeping generalization about white men sparked outrage and was seen as race-baiting by many. Van Jones, another CNN commentator, described the 2016 election of Donald Trump as a white lash against a changing country. This comment implied that white voters were motivated by racism rather than legitimate concerns about economic displacement, cultural change, or political alienation. Tiffany Cross, formerly of MSNBC, was known for making inflammatory statements about white people. She once aired a segment titled The Birth Dearth, where she discussed declining white birth rates in a tone that many interpreted as celebratory. Her rhetoric eventually led to her dismissal from MSNBC. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect a broader media culture that often portrays white men as the root of societal problems, rather than as individuals with their own struggles, values, and contributions. Academic institutions and the weaponization of identity politics. In academia, the concepts of white privilege and toxic masculinity have become ideological cornerstones. While these terms were initially intended to critique systemic issues, they are now frequently used to shame and marginalize white heterosexual males. Courses at major universities often frame whiteness as a pathology. For example, a 2021 training at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of African American History and Culture included a graphic that listed traits of whiteness, such as rugged individualism, the nuclear family, and objective, rational, linear thinking as oppressive constructs. Following public backlash, the museum removed the graphic, but the damage to public trust had already been done. The term toxic masculinity is now used so broadly that it often conflates normal male behavior, such as assertiveness or stoicism, with abuse or violence. Films like Promising Young Woman and media campaigns have portrayed men, particularly white men, as predators or oppressors in need of re-education. Political exploitation of gender and race. The Democratic Party has increasingly embraced identity politics, often at the expense of white male voters. This has backfired, particularly in recent elections. A 2024 opinion piece in the New York Post noted that Kamala Harris's campaign struggled to appeal to male voters, including black men. Barack Obama even scolded a group of black men in Pittsburgh for their lack of enthusiasm, suggesting their reluctance was due to sexism. Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. The campaign's response included cringeworthy efforts like the Man Enough ad, where actors proclaimed they were man enough to deadlift 500 pounds and braid the SIT out of my daughter's hair. The ad was widely mocked for its pandering tone and failure to connect with working-class men. Meanwhile, groups like the Lincoln Project ran ads urging men to be a man and vote for a woman, using masculinity as a political weapon rather than a virtue. The backlash, a political realignment. This cultural and political marginalization has not gone unnoticed. Many white men and women have responded by abandoning the Democratic Party. Donald Trump's rise was not merely a reaction to Barack Obama's presidency, it was a response to a growing sense that traditional American values, including faith, family, and hard work, were under attack. Trump's unapologetic defense of American identity, his rejection of political correctness, and his support for the nuclear family resonated with voters who felt vilified by the left. According to Pew Research, Trump won 62% of white male voters in 2016 and maintained strong support in 2020. This shift is not about race, it's about respect. It's about the right to exist without being constantly blamed for societal ills. It's about the right to raise a family, go to work, and live according to one's values without being labeled privileged or toxic. Conclusion: a call for respect and unity. As a black man, I reject the idea that progress for one group requires the demonization of another. True equality means lifting everyone up, not tearing anyone down. The rhetoric against white heterosexual men is not only unjust, it is un-American. It undermines the very principles of individual dignity and equal opportunity that this nation was built upon. We must move beyond the politics of resentment and identity. We must recognize that white men, like all people, deserve to be treated as individuals, not as scapegoats for historical grievances or ideological crusades. If we fail to do so, we risk deepening the divisions in our country and alienating millions of citizens whose only crime is being born into a demographic that has become politically unfashionable. It's time to end the war on white straight men, not because they are perfect, but because they are people. And in America, every person deserves respect.